You might remember us, the ones in the red shirts.
We can't afford guns being the leading cause of death for children and teens in this country.
Whether you're Republicans or Democrats, you can't look away.
We're not going to shut up until we get the change we deserve.
Thoughts and prayers are no longer enough. We need to take action now.
You didn't get this far by saying you can't. You didn't get this far by just being mediocre. You moms demand action, and that's what we demand.
Welcome to Movement Builders, a show about the people ending gun violence in America. All of us.
I'm Kaylin Ford.
And I'm Nikita McDaniel.
And we are so excited to be here with you for our first episode of the show. We talked a little bit about how each of us came to this work in the trailer, so check it out. But for me, being from Newtown, Connecticut is what brought me to this work. And I've heard from a lot of folks that worrying about their kids' safety or their own safety at school, in their neighborhoods, and in their communities is what pushed them to join this fight. And I think we've all felt that helplessness and anger and grief after a shooting, whether it's a mass shooting that makes the news or an act of gun violence that devastates a community but never makes headlines. And the folks in this movement are experts at taking people from fed up to fired up.
Yes, and our guest today, Shani Nuckols, really brings it home by honing in on how to turn folks' initial anger into constructive, long-term advocacy and how to cultivate that as a leader. And many of us are doing this, and it shows. We have more than 10 million national supporters nationwide, volunteers in every state, and strong, meaningful relationships with community partners across the country. We've sidelined the NRA, passed thousands of state and local gun safety laws, and broke the logjam in Congress to pass the most significant federal gun safety legislation in a generation.
And we're thrilled to be featuring the people building this movement on the ground across the country here on this podcast. So without further ado, we're thrilled to welcome our first guest, Shani Nuckols, a mom and organizer from Haddonfield, New Jersey, who has been a chapter leader and is now the elections lead during this pivotal election season. Shani, thank you so much for being here on Movement Builders.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you so much for being here. What drew you to this movement?
I got involved with moms back in the summer of 2015. I will own it. I was one of those really angry Facebook posters who, in the wake of the Sandy Hook school shooting, just let my anger out into the ether. That made me feel a little better for a while, but it absolutely wasn't productive in any way, shape, or form. And I think what finally made me change gears was how I felt in the wake of the AME church shooting in Charleston, where I just was horrified and devastated and just heartbroken for the members of that congregation who, because somebody's background check hadn't even been completed, had the ability to get their hands on a gun and walk into their safe community space of faith and just absolutely devastate that community. And I just didn't have words even to type into my Facebook profile anymore to post.
Yes.
I was just so bereft. And that was the day that I went and I looked for something else to do. And I found moms on Facebook, like so many people did at that time. And I don't know, I signed a form. And I'll never forget, the very next day somebody called me, like the very next day. And I wish I knew who that person was, because maybe I know them. But they invited me to a meeting that was taking place in the next town over, just a few days after that. And so I went. And by the time the meeting was over, I had met two people who would become my friends, who would become my partners in starting a local group where I live in the southern part of New Jersey, outside of Philadelphia, and who really would go on this adventure with me that became just one of the most meaningful things that I've done personally, and that has really shaped how I look at things. When you get into a space where you're working with people who've been personally impacted by gun violence, you start to think about things like compassion and collaboration and vision, and those are such key elements to the work that we do, whether we're planning an event or whether we're working with a community partner or just even having a one-to-one conversation with somebody who's been impacted by gun violence. And so I think the nature of the work that we do is advocacy work. And I really do think of those three things, compassion and collaboration and vision, as being really important parts of advocacy work.
I know a lot of folks, myself included, came here as activists, whether it was activists on social media or joining a march, signing a petition, taking those kind of one-off actions. But what we really need to do to change an issue as huge and as complicated as gun violence, we have to build this movement as organizers and bring many people into this movement, into this work. How has your understanding of organizing evolved over time? And how has that sort of journey been for you on your personal level and in your work?
And first, I do want to say I am not a solo actor here in making New Jersey great. There is an amazing team of really powerful, strong leaders here in New Jersey that I've had the fortune of working with and learning from and being in partnership with. And I just want to acknowledge that it's a team effort, a collaboration effort, and the wonderful support that we get from Everytown and specifically the Moms Demand field staff. Everybody is lifting to make all of the work that we do happen. But to speak to the conversation around activism and organizing, when we climbed out of the COVID lockdown and started to emerge in 2021, we really saw our leadership ranks had been depleted. A lot of leaders had stepped away for very understandable reasons. Here in New Jersey, all of the local group leads would have monthly meetings, and I would measure our success by how many people showed up at a monthly meeting or like how many people were signing up at a table. And most importantly, how exhausted we were. Like the more exhausted we were, the more successful we had to be, right? Mm-hmm. And in all of that work, what was falling to the bottom of our to-do list was really taking the time to engage the people that were showing up in that work. And so when we were asking people, what the asks were at that time were, oh, hey, you've come to a couple of meetings. It's so great to see you coming back. Would you ever consider being a leader? And here's a volunteer agreement to sign. And here's a 3-page job description of what we're asking you to do. And suffice to say, not too many people took us up on our offer at that point. We really needed to start thinking about intentional work that's maybe a little less sexy than brandishing our fists in the air, really stressing with leaders that the most important part of all of this work is picking up the phone after an event or an action is done and following up with the people who showed up so that you can start to engage them in an incremental way, asking a tabler one week to take on organizing the table the next time, to maybe being in charge of all the tables the next time, to the point where when you ask that person eventually to become like an events lead, it's not this big thing that they have no concept of. It's a natural thing that they expect and can see coming and are honored by. And that to me is the organizing work. And it's the work that's hard, but I think that's what's building a stronger chapter is really about.
Wow, a woman after my own heart. So instead of taking the action yourself, what's something that you've done to build the movement and effectively get others to take action?
When a mass shooting occurs that gets a lot of traction in the news and is on our TV screens and our social media feeds over and over again, we see an uptick in interest coming at all levels of the organization. And sometimes that uptick is like a flood or a tornado or a hurricane, where the level of interest is so high that you have to respond to it, but it can be overwhelming. And that's happened to me twice in my time with Moms. And I responded to that differently each time, along with my leadership team. So the first time back in 2018 was in the wake of the shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. And in my local group, which I was leading at the time, what we would do in the wake of one of those events was we would gather. And we had a coffee shop, and we would just show up there, and we'd bring care cards, and we would get coffee, and we would sit, and we would grieve together. We would express our frustration and our sadness together, and we would extend hands to those communities that were hurting. So we did that in the wake of Parkland, like a couple of days later. But instead of 20 people, like over 200 people showed up at this little coffee shop. So all of a sudden, we were being invited to speak 2, 3, 4 times a week. We were being asked to collaborate with social justice ministries in different faith communities across town, or could we meet with this town council or this lawmaker and establish different programs. It was exhilarating and exhausting, and it lasted for months. Maybe we added a couple of new leaders to our leadership team, but at the end of the day, the people who were doing all the work really never changed. So fast forward to 2022, we had back-to-back-to-back shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde.
Right.
That weekend, my co-lead was at her son's engagement party, and I was actually out of town as well, but I was getting regular messages from our organizing manager because I was on call, and she would send me a message. 7,000 people have signed up to take action in New Jersey.
Right.
9,000, 11,000.
I remember those
think
big numbers.
Oh my God, I think it got up to about 12,000 people. And when Teresa finally came back and we met, we were like, what are we going to do? We can't do what we all were doing the last time. And so what we did was we called all of our state leads together, the Be Smart people and the elections people and the ledge people, the data people, the social media people, the communications people. And we asked them each to work together to put together a 30-minute presentation around their bucket of work. And we set up a Zoom meeting schedule called Get to Know Moms. And then we called the 8 people that we knew in Van had made calls in the past. And we said, would you help us do turnout calls for these events? But can you also ask them to sign up to make calls with you?
I love that.
And so through that effort, we had those 8 people became team captains, and they were responsible as we recruited new callers to stewarding those callers, to training them and to keeping them going and to holding them to a commitment of 25 calls a week. And by the end of that 5-week process, we'd recruited 50 phone callers, made 4,600 calls to new signups. We had 1,700 people show up at those events, and we recruited 12 new leads. We started 2 new groups. And that, to me, was organizing because we had people at every level of our organization taking responsibility for a scope of work that was way more narrow that we were able to define so that we could give ourselves time to do the follow-up and to do all of the work that it took to engage that number of people in what we were doing.
Wow.
That's incredible, Shani. And we know that you, like so many of our other amazing volunteer leaders, you're balancing the demands of your role with moms with work and caregiving, maybe school, other commitments and obligations. And so, especially in those moments of rapid response to a mass shooting or another kind of tragedy like that, sometimes we can just go into autopilot. And like you said, just like do. And we don't even have time. We think we don't have time to think about the strategic choices and how we build this movement long term, and we empower people to step into leadership roles.
I always like to add that we should use the word no a little bit more.
Yes.
So that we're really working in line with our chapter plan to guide us through what we should be saying yes to, the work that's going to move those goals in our chapter plan forward.
And no lets you say yes to other things that are going to really help you longer term to create the change that you want to see. I know you're the elections lead for New Jersey. We have gun sense candidates at every level of government running for office. How have you balanced the demands of elections work in the past with building a movement and bringing new folks into this work that will stay after the polls close?
We know that it is critical to elect gun sense candidates up and then down the ballot here. Our volunteers historically have gotten really, really into elections. But when you dig into those numbers a little bit, it's a small group of people doing an awful lot of work, which is a theme here, right? Yeah. And so really what we're trying to do this year is turn that a little bit on its head and say we want to see a lot of people maybe doing a little less, right? One of the things that we're doing this year that's a little bit different is we are making sure that every Canvas action or phone bank action that we take as New Jersey moms comes with a pre-action meetup. And that gives moms a chance to introduce yourself and tell why you're there, maybe even partner up with another mom to do the door knocking together. And that's really important because if you're making personal connections with each other while you're doing the work, first of all, it's a lot more fun and you're more likely to come back and do more, but you're already getting more invested in the community and it's becoming an identity. And so when the follow-up call happens, thanks for turning out to that Canvas, do you think you could maybe host the next one? and someone could say yes, because that didn't seem so hard and it was really fun. And we think that all of that work together, we hope, will turn some of these election volunteers into team members and maybe even leaders. So that's our plan. I hope it works.
Guess what? It absolutely will work. You have put that into the universe and you are manifesting it through a plan.
Yes. I think that sometimes we, especially with the kind of sexism and misogyny that we can see in our politics and in our political system, we're told that women have to be twice as good in order to step into any kind of leadership role because there will be so much criticism and questioning. And one thing that I think is so beautiful about moms is that we let people recognize that leader is already there in them. And here's an opportunity to own something or seize something or get out front, and you can do it, and we'll help you, and we'll give you the skills, and we'll give you the support. But that leader already exists in yourself. And I think that's really powerful.
It's interesting as you said that, because I think also it speaks to the sort of like my evolving notion of what a leader is. Like I would say when I came in that a good leader did a lot of the work because we were signing up to be the leader. And it wasn't until I really was in chapter leadership here, honestly, where I was like, I was keeping people from doing the work by doing so much of it myself. And once I figured that out, first of all, my life became a lot more easy to balance, but more importantly, like people are really excited to do. That's why they come to us. They want to do something. And if you don't give them something to do pretty quickly, they don't stick around.
I think we do think of leaders as doers. And sometimes your role as a leader is to step back and listen, or step back and empower others to step forward, even if they're not going to do it in the same way that you would, even if the end result is going to be different. And that's a challenge.
And, you know, one of the things that I've started really thinking about, if you can't find someone to do it, then maybe it just doesn't get done. And you focus on what you've got to do, but don't step into that breach necessarily, because that's going to take you away from doing the foundational organizing work that we really need you to do. And it's okay if that thing doesn't happen in your vision. Flex a little bit and focus on getting what you've got to get done. And eventually somebody, by doing your work, somebody's going to step in and get that work done. That just leads to a lot more calmness around open leadership positions, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Thank you for sharing such wisdom and knowledge with us. What's one challenge that you faced as a chapter, and what have you learned from that? And how would you have done things differently?
I think one of our biggest challenges is representation. Do our leadership teams really look like New Jersey? Are we representing the communities most impacted by gun violence within the ranks of our own leadership teams that are setting priorities and making decisions for what we're doing? We like to think of New Jersey as like this blue bastion of liberalness, but New Jersey has this horrific history of redlining and other policies that really have made New Jersey one of the most segregated states in the country. And that's really impacted how our local groups look. We really have focused a lot of our time on building community partnerships that I think have grown to be really strong collaborations that we've prioritized over almost everything else that we do. And that those partnerships have really informed our work and enriched our work and helped us figure out the roadmap we need to take to move forward with some of the initiatives that we do. But we still, I think, really do need input on the inside from people who live in those communities most impacted by gun violence. And then the second thing is that we have been really intentional about integrating our survivor membership lead team in everything that we do, making sure that the first 5 slides of a Zoom call are all about that, so that people who are joining us who have had a personal experience with gun violence know that we center that is why we are here, and that there are resources that they may want to tap into. And so I think those 2 changes that our new chapter lead, Jeannie Stifelman, is making are really meaningful. And I think that we're going to see some of those voices emerge in our leadership teams because of those choices that we're making.
we hear a lot from folks who didn't realize they were a survivor until they join our movement, right? Until they come to an event. And maybe it's an experience of witnessing gun violence or having a loved one taken by firearm suicide or homicide in a way that they've never really gotten to speak about because of stigma or shame, and feeling like this is a place for them that they can come home to and be their whole selves in is just incredible. You've met a lot of people through this work. Who continues to inspire you as a movement builder and an organizer?
Yeah, so this is where I might get a little teary. So one of the women that I met was a woman named Shirley Conroy. And she and I worked together to start our local group here in South Jersey. And we had really different styles and maybe a little bit of different priorities. I was a frenetic, fast-paced person, really focused on getting things done efficiently and making sure all the moving parts kept moving because there was so much work that we were doing. And Shirley was slower. She really prioritized getting to know the people who were coming in the door. She was really instrumental in establishing some of our initial connections with some of our most important community partners in the area now. She listened, and she knew everybody's story. And she worked herself to the bone to do that. The work wasn't always super efficient, but the personal connection was, I've never met anyone like that. And we were together in 2020, masked up outside watching the election returns on election night. And we came together again a few days after that to jump on trampolines when President Biden's victory was announced. And then a couple weeks after that, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she passed away a year later, so in 2021. And I still think about her all the time. She's like a little voice where I'm getting overwhelmed and I've got a lot of work to do, or I'm writing an email and she'll be like, remember to put that little nice introduction there, like asking how people are before you start writing your email. Like she's constantly reminding me to prioritize the personal part of our work, which I think is really the special sauce of moms. It's what makes us who we are, is that we are community builders as we are movement builders. And she really epitomized that. So she's who continues to inspire me and inform how I do what I do. So yeah, thinking of you, Shirley, all the time.
This is such a powerful movement because, as you said, it's building community, it's building a family, it's building teams of people who want to save the lives of people they may never meet. And that's a powerful uniter. And the relationships we make in this movement, the friendships and the partnerships we make, go far beyond the work that we do together and touch so many parts of our lives. Shani, thank you so much for joining us on Movement Builders.
And thank you right back for the opportunity to talk and reflect a little bit. I'm really excited to see where we're headed in the next few months and beyond. I know we're setting ourselves up for making more change.
I absolutely loved hearing from Shani and how she went from activist to organizer, and also how her idea of what it means to really lead in this work has evolved over time. And finally, how she and her fellow New Jersey volunteer leaders are helping new folks to step up.
Yes, absolutely. And I love how she's helped people see that leader in themselves, even if they're new to this work. That's more important than ever because it's all hands on deck, Nikita. We have less than 100 days to go before this election. We need everyone to join us, and there's a place for everyone in this movement. There's something to do, no matter whether you have an hour to give, a weekend to give, or more. So please keep checking the Demand Action app and social media to take part in our 100 Days, 100 Ways challenge. These actions may seem small, but they all add up and they all move the needle.
They absolutely do. Y'all, this has been amazing. And as we said before, this podcast is about the people ending gun violence in America. All of us. It's your community. It's our community. So tell us what part of today's episode resonated with you. Share a movement builder who inspires you in this work. Send us your voice notes to movementbuilders@everytown.org. That email again is movementbuilders@everytown.org. Include your name and where you're from. And you might even be heard in the future on Movement Builders.
Yes, keep those voice notes coming. Thanks for listening. I'm Kaylin.
And I'm Nikita. Thank you for all that you do to save lives. It is working.
See you next time.